I'm gonna need you to open it.
I can't do that.
The TSA agent slid the polished mahogany case back across the rollers. "Sir, I'm going to need you to open it." The soldier's voice was as flat and hard as packed earth. "I can't do that." The agent, a young man named Kevin with a name tag that hung slightly crooked, sighed the sigh of someone who had said the same thing 1,000 times. "It's policy, sir. Any case that can't be scanned has to be opened for visual inspection." He pointed a limp finger at a sign on the wall, a list of sterile regulations that meant nothing in this moment. The soldier, Sergeant Marcus Thorne, didn't look at the sign. His eyes, clear and unnervingly steady, were fixed on the flag case. It wasn't just wood and glass to him. It was a vessel, a promise. Inside lay the remains of a life, folded into the 13 stripes and 50 stars of the American flag. He was the escort, the final guard. His duty was to bring a hero home, and that duty had one unbreakable rule. The flag is never to be set down, never to be disrespected, and the case, once sealed, is never to be opened. He placed a gloved hand on the case, a simple gesture that felt like an anchor dropped into the floor of the terminal. The chaos of Orlando International Airport, the rolling suitcases, the crying babies, the final boarding calls, all of it seemed to fade into a dull roar. He didn't get angry. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, a mountain of quiet duty in a river of human hurry. And that's what broke the pattern. In a world of yelling and complaining, his stillness was a disruption. It was louder than any shout. The agent, Kevin, shifted his weight. "Sir, I don't want to make this difficult." "You already have," Marcus said, his voice low, but carrying the weight of command. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. This is where the walls start closing in. You ever been blamed for doing the right thing? For standing on a principle that nobody else seems to see? Marcus was standing on sacred ground, but to everyone else, he was just holding up the line. Behind him, a man in a tailored suit, reeking of expensive cologne and impatience, huffed loudly. "For God's sake, just open the box, soldier. Some of us have flights to catch." Marcus's jaw tightened, a single muscle twitching in his cheek. He didn't turn around. He couldn't. His focus was singular, the case. He could feel the eyes on his back, a mix of annoyance and curiosity. He remembered the words of Corporal Miller's mother, her voice choked with tears as she had gripped his arm. "Just bring my boy home, Sergeant, please, just bring him home." That promise was a physical weight in his chest. The agent, Kevin, clearly out of his depth, spoke into his radio. "I need a supervisor at Checkpoint Charlie. We have a situation." The word situation echoed what Marcus was feeling. This wasn't a procedural hiccup. This was a battle of two worlds, the civilian world of rules and regulations, and his world of honor and unbreakable oaths. And right now he was losing. The thought of failing, of having to call that grieving mother and tell her there was a delay, felt like swallowing glass. He wasn't just going to miss a flight. He was going to fail him. He was going to fail David. Have you ever felt like the world just doesn't see you? Like your deepest reasons are invisible? Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to stand your ground for something no one else understood. The supervisor arrived, a woman with a stern face and an air of authority that brooked no argument. Her name tag read Diane. She listened to Kevin's clipped explanation, her eyes flicking from the agent to Marcus and finally to the case. "Sir," she said, her voice firm but not unkind, "I understand you have your reasons, but I have my job. The law is the law. We need to see what's in the case." The businessman chimed in again, louder this time. "He's disrespecting you. He's holding up dozens of people. If he's got nothing to hide, what's the problem?" The crowd was starting to murmur. Phones were coming out, little black mirrors reflecting the ugly scene. Marcus felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This was turning into a spectacle. He, in his immaculate dress blues, was being painted as the problem. a troublemaker. It was a betrayal he hadn't anticipated. Some of us know what it's like to be loyal and be left behind anyway. He served the country these people lived in, yet in this moment, he was an obstacle to their convenience. "It's a flag," Marcus said, his voice strained. "A funeral flag." Diane's expression softened, but only for a second. "I sympathize, Sergeant, I truly do, but I can't make an exception. If I do it for you, I have to do it for everyone. Please, don't make me call the police." The threat hung in the air, suffocating. The police, being detained, missing the flight, failing his mission, failing David. He closed his eyes, the image of his friend's smiling face flashing in his mind the last time he saw him alive, laughing in a dusty tent thousands of miles from here. "See you back home, Marcus." He couldn't open the case. It was more than a rule. It was a final right. To open it in this sterile, indifferent place felt like a desecration. It was the last sanctuary, the last private space David had on this earth. He took a slow, deep breath, the kind they teach you in training to calm your heart before the world explodes. "Then you'll have to call them," he said, his voice a whisper of steel. And just as Diane reached for her radio, a new voice cut through the tension. "That won't be necessary." The voice was calm, deep, and carried an effortless authority that silenced the murmuring crowd. Everyone turned. Walking toward them was a man in a crisp pilot uniform, his silver hair neatly combed, his eyes holding a wisdom that went far beyond flight plans and weather patterns. He was the captain of American Airlines Flight 1451 to Chicago, Marcus's flight. He didn't look at the TSA agents. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the uniform, the posture, the unwavering gaze. Then his eyes settled on the mahogany case. And here's where the world tilted on its axis. The pilot walked right past Diane and stood beside Marcus, facing the agents. He didn't speak to them. He spoke to the case. He placed his hand gently on his chest and gave a slow, respectful nod. It wasn't a greeting. It was a salute. Then he turned to Diane, his voice now holding a quiet command. "This soldier is a Tomb Guard sentinel. He is on a sacred escort mission. That case contains the remains of a fallen American soldier. Under Department of Defense protocol, that flag case is never, under any circumstances, to be opened once it is sealed. It is considered an extension of the casket." Diane stared, speechless. Kevin looked at the floor. The businessman in the suit suddenly seemed to find the pattern on the carpet fascinating. The pilot wasn't finished. "I'm Captain John Riley. That soldier and his precious cargo are my passengers. We will not be leaving without him." He looked back at Marcus, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than duty crossed the pilot's face. It was empathy. It was brotherhood. "I was an escort once, son. They brought my boy home from Kandahar the same way, in a box just like that one." The raw, personal truth of that statement hit the terminal like a shockwave. This wasn't a pilot pulling rank. This was a father honoring a son. This wasn't about regulations anymore. It was about humanity. It was about a debt that can never be fully repaid. That's the moment everything changed. It takes just one person to turn judgment into honor. If you think Captain Riley is a hero, hit that like button right now. A hush fell over the security checkpoint. The silence was absolute, profound. The sounds of the airport, the announcements, the wheels, the chatter, all of it seemed to have receded, pushed back by the sheer gravity of the moment. No one was looking at their phones anymore. They were looking at Marcus, at the pilot, at the flag case. But they weren't just looking, they were seeing. The businessman, who had been so loud just minutes ago, cleared his throat. He looked at Marcus, his face flushed with a shame that was plain to see. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I didn't know." Diane, the supervisor, seemed to shrink. She looked at the case, then at Marcus, and finally at Captain Riley. She gave a single, sharp nod. "Go ahead, Sergeant," she said. her voice thick with emotion. She gestured to Kevin, who quickly opened a side gate, bypassing the scanner completely. As Marcus walked through, carrying the case, something incredible happened. It started with one person, an older woman with a grandson clutching her hand. She put her hand over her heart. Then, the man next to her did the same, and then another, and another. As Marcus and Captain Riley walked toward the gate, the entire terminal, section by section, fell silent. The river of chaos parted for them. People stopped walking. They took off their hats. They put their hands on their hearts. Businessmen, vacationing families, students, airport staff, all stood in a silent, unprompted honor guard. There were no cameras flashing now. There were no snide remarks. There was only a heavy, beautiful, heartbreaking silence. A silence of respect, a silence of understanding, a silence that said, "We see you. We see your sacrifice. We are sorry." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat, a burn behind his eyes he hadn't felt through all the years of rigid discipline. He kept his chin up, his back straight, his steps measured. He was a soldier. He wouldn't break. But as he walked through that corridor of silent strangers, he felt the weight on his shoulders lift, just a little. He wasn't alone in this anymore. The promise he carried was being shared, held up by the hands and hearts of an entire airport. When they reached the gate, the agent scanned his ticket without a word. Captain Riley put a hand on his shoulder. "We'll take care of him on board, Sergeant. He'll have his own seat." On the plane, they placed the flag case in the window seat next to Marcus, buckling it in as if it were a person. As the plane taxied to the runway, Marcus looked out the window, not at the tarmac, but at the reflection of the mahogany case in the glass. He saw the flag inside, a blur of red, white, and blue. He finally allowed himself to unclench his hand. In his palm, damp with sweat, was a small, worn dog tag, Miller, D. He whispered into the quiet hum of the cabin, a final promise kept. "We're going home, David. We're going home." The plane lifted into the clouds, leaving the world behind. And for the first time on his long journey, Sergeant Marcus Thorne felt a sense of peace. He hadn't just protected a flag, he had guarded a soul, and an entire terminal full of strangers had stood guard with him. This story is for everyone who carries a promise, for every silent sacrifice made in the name of honor. Subscribe if you believe that some things are more important than rules.